Hi, this week we're going to be painting a hellebore leaf. Now I know we have done hellebores before, but there are so many variations on leaf, and we'll give you some lovely photographs of this particular one that I'm doing today. And what I love about this particular leaf is the sort of mottled effect. Now, as with all our projects, it's a really good idea as a beginner just to do the first process. So the very first stage is always good to practice. Good to practice the drawing and all of the colour mixing, which would just be perfect practice for you. And then as and when you feel a little bit out of depth and it's slightly going wrong or it's not going quite as you planned, that's when you stop, go back, revisit those first few steps. But if it's all going tickety-boo, then carry on and see the project through. I would say this is quite an advanced leaf right through to the end, but you could be the judge of that and see how you get on. Now what I've done is I've bought in an old painting, not old painting, but from one of my first books where I did a page of leaves, and I thought it'd be quite nice to sort of show you what you can do with your leaves, so that when you're practicing and you've got a technique for a particular leaf under your belt, you could add it aesthetically to a large sheet of paper, and you could sort of twist and turn it and have a go at putting different angles on there and add other leaves. And I just think that to me is fantastic as a botanical painter, to just get to grips with all those variations on green. So that's something you could think about. And when I start doing some of my composition tutorials, I'll talk to you about how you could lay them on the page and get the most out of your artistic skills. So we'll put that over there. Well, I'll just stand it there for the minute. And I've got my drawing all ready to go. So first thing we need to do is mix the colours. And this colour is a particularly tricky one to do. It's quite a dark green, almost we're in the realms of something like a camellia leaf, and it's quite a minty blue, a dark minty blue. So just get my mixing brush. What we're going to do is we're going to mix up a lovely big puddle of French ultramarine. Just really give that a good old sweep, so you get plenty of pigment right in the middle there. Now this is a French ultramarine that's actually by a different make, but stick with your Sennelier one. This is Daniel Smith French ultramarine, and it's rather lovely. It's rather rich and pretty, and the reason I'm using it is I've basically just run out of my Sennelier French ultramarine, and it's just to show you that you can mix different makes together. And to that I'm adding some Sennelier Yellow Deep. This is to make a really rich dark green, and keep it really thick like that, a nice gloopy mix. And I'm going to just try that on a piece of paper, because you never know, sometimes you get lucky just with two colours. And I'm going to offer that up for the cameraman Gavin to have a look at today. Yeah, so that's quite a blue green, and what I want to do is I just want to add some lemon to that, because that will dry even bluer, so we want to up the yellow. So I'm going to mix in some yellow. This is the lemon yellow. So that's always a good thing to remember. I probably mentioned it before, but it doesn't hurt to mention these things every time, because some things stick and some things don't. And if you add a little bit extra lemon to something, when it dries, it should keep its colour a lot better. The yellows just fade. They're just they're a bit temperamental. So what I've got is I've got a really nice thick gloopy mix there, and it's going to fade because we're going to put it onto water. So make sure it's really nice and thick so that you can keep adding that colour in. Right, next thing to do, I'm going to put my glaze on. I'm going to use my number 8 brush. Now you don't need to use a number 8, you can use a number 6. And I'm just going to use a big brush to get lots of water on there. And I'm going to do the foreshortened, it's like foreshortened, slightly enlarged leaf on this side. It's sort of coming at me. I'm just going to tilt it up again so that it's In fact, if I just put a little bit of scrunched up tissue paper underneath, just retrieve that from the bin. If I put that underneath that leaf, because the drawing that I've done is that one's slightly higher and a bit more towards me. That's lovely. So it's catching the light just perfectly for me. See, it's out of shot for you on the painting, but we'll put a nice photograph to show you what we're doing. So there's some beautiful light reflecting on this part of the leaf, which is what I want to show. So I'm going to leave that a little bit paler. Let's put a nice big wodge of water on there. Quite a strong drawing today. I haven't softened it with blue tack because it's a very dark leaf and it's unnecessary at the moment. So a nice strong drawing so I can see what I'm doing. Now, because the leaves are all attached, you know, you've got a three leaf here attached to one stem. So what I want to do is I want to take the water into the other leaves, just so that when the paint stops here, you don't get a hard edge. And what I'm doing is I'm putting a really nice big reservoir through the main leaf there, like so, and then pulling the brush backwards from the serrations, just like so. So you just get a little bit of water into the serrations. Very important that they're not added on afterwards, because they tend to always look added on. That sounds wrong, added on. Anyway, I'm sure it isn't. And what I've got is I've got this hellebore in the garden. I've literally just planted it. I must have spent a fortune on hellebores over the years. I'm trying to find the perfect spot for them. And in the end, what I've done is I've made a raised bed and put 4 hellebores in there. 5, I think. I've rescued one from the garden, put them in there, and it's just fingers crossed and keeping an eye on them, making sure that they survive. I really hope they do, because I love them so much and I have spent a fortune over the years. Don't tell the husband. So then what we need to do is give that a little stir and really fill that brush up with paint. I mean, if you have got a number 8, if you've invested in a number 8, then this is the time to bring it out, as it were. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the paint. Notice I didn't mop anything up because I want it really wet. I've got a lot to do on this leaf. So I'm going to drop the paint around the highlight. So I've got the highlight on this top edge here. I'm going to use all of that puddle I can see. And keep stirring it, keep it mixed nicely on the palette. And then in here, just these can all go fuzzier. This is what you're looking for if you're a beginner. You're looking for this cotton wool edge. That's what you want. I'm going to keep back from here because I'm just going to throw a little bit of lemon in there in a minute. I should have mixed that up, but it won't take a second. And then I'm going to just grab a little bit of water and do a watered down version of that colour. Just water it down on the edge. And then tap. I'll just let some of that paint just water down. Like I say, I've got too much paint on my brush. You want it a little bit paler. And then just tap that into the spoon part of that leaf. That's lovely, good. And now what I'm going to do is pick up my dark again. And up here where the light isn't quite showing, I'm going to pull it back into the main body, like so, from the serrations. Now, we're getting them on there as precise as we possibly can, but don't worry if you go a little bit off-piste, you know, just let them, just put them on and we can always perfect them afterwards. And then on here, I just want to put a little blob and to keep some light. So I'm just going to put a little blob at the tip and just let them settle. This is quite good fun. Actually, as a beginner, this would be quite exciting, I'd have thought, if you've not done much painting before, just watching everything splurge everywhere. And then I'm going to take all the water out of my brush and all the paint, and then just tap it lightly, roll it lightly on the dab pad. And what we're going to do is we're just going to smooth through and just bring some of the paint down where we want it. So you're going to clean and roll several times. We're getting a little bit of separation there, it's quite nice. A little bit of blue. So I'm just going to pull some of that colour through for where that highlight is. And then up here I'm going to grab a little bit of lemon right on the tip of my brush. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean because it's probably got a little bit of blue on it anyway. But I just want to get that a little bit lemony up there, just for the start of those veins. And then over here where the highlight is, just soften through. Don't worry about the separation if it happens. It's because we made it very wet, and I just want it to look, the plan was to make it look slightly mottled, but I probably didn't warn you beforehand. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to mop a little bit more of that light out that we want. So just put a clean damp brush right onto the paper like that, and in between every sweep wipe it clean. So just mop up. Try and put it where you can see where you left the light before, because it's a little bit paler. Don't worry about the separation, just feather it in like so and just mop. You can see how I said this was more of a an advanced project, just because we're having to do quite a lot on the first section. Now down here I'm just going to tease the brush again just to get a little bit of colour on those serrations, but those we will define later on. So have a little breather, because that was quite intense, and pick up your colour on the tiptoe of your brush. I'm just going to get a nice roll. And then if you have a moment, if you didn't get those, I'm just get my brush perfect. If you didn't get those serrations perfect, you can just, before it dries, just define a little bit more precisely how they go. Because sometimes it's difficult to get that point on when you're rushing to get paint on everywhere. Everything else is settling and relaxing, and so we can relax and settle into just tapping those lovely points onto the serrations. Now I'm working from life, so I'm working from the leaf in front of me, and you've got my drawing, but if you wanted to, you could work, and you will be working obviously if you're doing this from the photograph. What you could do is you could print the photograph off and trace from the photograph and get those serrations absolutely precise if you wanted to. Or you can go from my drawing and just perfect it along the way, because I'm sure there's a little bit of perfecting that needs to take place. I'm quite a fast drawer. I draw as fast as I can so that I can work from life. But of course you'll have the advantage of working from the photograph if you so choose, and that means you can slow down and get a little bit more precision on the positions of these. You can see I'm going really slowly here, just tapping and getting that angle right. It's the angle of these serrations that's important. And just go down to the bottom here, and we'll do the other ones a different way, because there's always more than one way to paint something. Lovely, so we've got some lovely separation there. I'm enjoying that. So it's all settled, and this side is very matte now. It's just about to dry. So what I'm going to do with my number 4 brush, which I'm going to wake up with some water and give it a little twist, I'm going to run through the centre vein just before it dries. Keep cleaning your brush, and then just, if you can, just run the tip of a clean damp brush through where the veins are. And if you get it the right sort of wetness on this leaf, you will find that by the time you've done those serrations, it should be just the right dryness to do this. Just getting a little bit more. My brush isn't picking up any water. Sometimes when they go to sleep in the brush roll, they dry out and you have to keep wetting them just to get them to wake up. I'm just getting the start of those lower veins on this leaf. Now the above that is still a little bit wet, so we're going to just try the lower area where it's not quite so wet. And I need to go there, so you need to run through and make sure you're going to go to the right place. So what I'm doing is I'm depositing a little bit of water with the brush and then checking where I'm going. And what it's doing is it's pushing through that paint, just a tiny little separation there where the water's depositing and just pushing the paint aside. It's like our own little tiny cauliflower that we're creating there. And just the very last tip of the brush, you're just running that last tip through, making sure you know where you're going. I'm going all the way over there. And if nothing happens, it could be too dry, in which case just try and do it again. And if it just runs through wet paint, nothing will happen if it's too wet. So it'll either be too wet or too dry. But just keep trying until the moment occurs. I always think of this as a bit of a eureka moment for me when I discovered I could do this, and then everything else just seemed so easy. You just thought, well, if I can do that, then I'm in control. So here we go, nice little fine lines, the last hair of your number 4 brush. And because the paint's quite thick, it is actually showing up much better than I thought it would, because we're going for quite a strong drawing consistency. Don't worry if they're not really bright, because you can come back and lift out a little bit more when it's dry. But the more you can get off now, the better, because you'll get a much softer, more natural line with the tip of your number 4 than you will with an eradicator. A little bit more. This is as hard as it gets, hopefully. This is where we're trying to control the watercolour and then make it do something that we want it to do. So a little tiny, sort of 1 or 2 strokes just to get it really bright where you want it brighter. You can see you're just eking it out. Lovely. And of course, because we put the water up here, we've got a lovely soft join there where we can come back and do the other leaves afterwards. So I'm going to go and put the next 2 leaves on, and each time I do it, you need to let this area completely dry, because obviously you're joining them onto one another. So every time you do it, you glaze the other leaves so you don't get the neck of the other leaves, so you don't get a hard line. So that while you're putting your colours on, it's just keeping nice and soft there with that little bit of lemon. So I'll put the other 2 leaves on, and hopefully that one will be lovely and dry, ready for the next stage. Right, I've mapped all 3 leaves onto the page. Now normally what I would do at this stage is say, oh, let's remove all of the pencil, but I'm going to leave the pencil on there because it's not going to get in our way today. And I'd quite like to start building up the leaf before we go on to the stem. So I'm going to start showing you how I would then move on to the next stage on here. What we're going to do is we're going to build up the colour, and then when the colour's built up, then remove the very fine veins afterwards. So we've got the structure that we lifted out, the first veins that we lifted out, we've got the structure and the position to work on, but those really refined little lines we'll do later. So what you need is you need your colour mixed up, the same sort of thickness again, and we're going to put it on in very small little sweeps onto a dry surface, so it needs to be completely dry, and we're just going to take it a little section at a time. And I'm loath to call this dry brushing because it is and it isn't. It's more of a sort of very delicate application of small strokes of paint rather than the very, very dry brushing that we've done on a lot of projects. We might do some dry brushing later, but not at the moment. And I'm just going to add a little bit more lemon to the mix as well, so it's a little bit brighter. And that's really because we don't want to sort of sandwich 2 dark colours on top of one another. We want to try and bring some life into the leaf as well. So I'm using my number 4 because I want very small strokes, and we're working in the areas in between the veins. And if I just show you the sort of application, so it's a very light sweep like that, very, very gently. So this is where it gets a little bit more advanced, and if you are a beginner, then repeat the first sections again and again until you get those really comfortably under your belt. Now the secret to this is not to put too much on at one time. So we're building up the colour, this is fine, and then very, very carefully when you get to the vein, just start trimming away a little bit of the width of it, because hopefully they'll have come out nice and clean, but also you want them to get a little bit finer so that they look really natural. So you can see I'm just very gently, almost just very lightly tapping on top of the original colour with this slightly brighter green, a little bit more lemon in it. And when you get to a lighter area, just feather it away. No water, no tissue, no dabbing, just lots of very gentle little strokes. And then you can move every other area, which would be simpler. So what I'm going to do is go up here, because there's another little vein that I didn't manage to get out. And I just want to, what I do is I draw where I want the vein to be, and then tap below that. So just very gently dabbing that green over the top. And then if you did get any separation from the French ultramarine, it's hidden underneath this little layer of green. And then up close to that vein with the tip of your brush. One of the things that people always ask me is how to do leaves, and I must admit I do love painting leaves. There are some fantastic artists out there that do leaves really well, and it's always a joy to see a beautifully painted leaf. And I must say that if you are thinking of exhibiting and you've got the flowers sorted, make sure the leaves are at least as good, because that's often what people are looking at. For the botanical shows anyway, they want to see really good leaves. Even if they're a very good softly painted leaf, they need to be convincing. So I'm just going to fill in this little area here, so you get an idea of the very, very light stroking of the tip of the brush there, just so you can be almost like colouring in very gently on the top. Get close to that vein and just trim some of the width away so it's really fine. Keep looking at your leaf, very important to look at your leaf so you're mimicking what you see. My spaces are a little bit off, but it's still anatomically correct, so I'm not going to worry too much. And then I'm just going to I'm going to raise that, make that a little bit narrower there, move that vein over a bit. So I'm going to paint the darker part coming closer to the edge of the leaf there and right up to that pencil line. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use that colour and start filling in those spaces in between. And I do that on the top there. Now what you need to know before I go and put any of this to music is what you do when you get to the lighter bits. So where you've got the highlight here, I'm going to sort of twist my body round, if you like, because I don't want to move the painting. And from the very light highlighted area, just feather very lightly like that, so that you don't go over the highlight. And that is sort of more dry brushing, but it's just very, very light little feathery marks towards the highlight. And then you can relax and continue filling in this gap. Now this section here has got lots of little veins coming through it, but they're the ones we're going to pull out at the end. So and this one I'm just going to build the colour up very gently over the top. So as you get close to the light, feather it. Once you've filled in the section, you can then, just with a light damp brush, just tap away any little fine lines that make it look like you feathered it. All right, so we'll build that up and come back to you when I've got the colour really nice and strong. Okay, so I've put in some of those little patches now between the veins, and it's quite important that you go slowly with that and allow those to dry. And I've mapped in a few of these really quite unusual areas, basically because they're hit by the light. They're sort of funny little patches and they look quite messy at the moment, but what I tend to do, and what I would advise you do, is you just map them in very gently, don't overwork them, and just let them rest, and then we can come back, add a little bit more, and so on. So something like that, that's quite a feature corner, we need to just work that up really slowly. So now that that first layer of the second layer of green is dry, what I want to do is reveal the veins beneath. And so I'm going to use my number 4 brush with a little bit of water on it and some tissue paper. And I'm just going to get into the zone. You've just got to look at the leaf, look at the painting, look at the leaf, look at the painting. And I'm going to draw with the tip of the brush. So I'm going to find my main vein that I've already drawn in. And what I'm doing is I'm going to run through, just with water, the vein between those two main veins and lift out. And you see that should reveal quite nicely because we went heavy with the paint. We've got a lot of pigment on there, so any disturbing now we can lift almost right back to the white. Although it is, you will find it's stained slightly from the yellow, so it will have a little yellow tinge, which is quite good because they are quite sort of fresh green, lemony green. So again, you've just got to paint as though you can see where you're going. You can't really. And then dab. And this you can get really nicely switched off here. Turn the radio on and just map them out, because this is the most complicated but simple thing to do at this stage. So off we go. I'll just do this leaf. We're just working on this one leaf now because the others are more or less the same sort of thing. So we'll just work this leaf up until we get all of those veins showing that we need. Okay, I've got all of those veins that I need out, and it's actually quite satisfying doing that, so give that one a go. The next thing that we need to do is we need to just irritate a little bit more light along the serrations. And I'm doing all of this because there's a bit of housekeeping before we start putting any more colour on, just to get those highlights really bright. I've got my eradicator, and along the edge of the leaf here there's some nice little bright lights. Now that's very satisfying when you're doing that, because you know sometimes you think, oh, I've lost all the highlights, but it's quite good fun. So I'm just going to wiggle along those edges with my eradicator and damp them away, and that's what I do down there, just to bring that light back along those serrations. Don't worry too much if it doesn't come off straight away. Just give it a little rest, dab off what you can, and then come back and do it again. See if that makes a bit of difference. Because sometimes, you know, you get a little bit too much yellow in the mix and it stains or whatever. So that's the top ones there. There's not much light on those very tall ones up there, but right on the corner, little tiny dot on the corner of each. When I say corner, I mean on the point. I don't mean corner at all. So just take that little bit of light out the very top bits there. And while we've got the eradicator in hand, if there's any major veins that you missed on the first lift out, then you can put those back in, or you can brighten some areas if you wanted to. So we'll just see what happens. I think that one's bright enough. I just want to smooth out along this line. A little bit more water on my brush. If you don't have the eradicator with a bit of water on there, it's not really going to do much. So make sure it's wet. So do make sure you have some water on there. And just smooth out. If you've got fluff everywhere today, I think it's my jumper. Just smooth out any areas that you weren't happy with. So that's that bit done. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with my number 4. I'm going to mix up some nice strong green again. So we'll go for the same mix, keep it the same, nice and simple. So some Sennelier yellow, French ultramarine, nice lot of yellow here, just get it really nice and gloopy. And I'm going to add to that a little bit of indigo. We're going to have a few colours in this. So we've got Sennelier yellow deep, French ultramarine, Sennelier lemon yellow, a little bit of indigo to make it really dark, and then I'm going to add some quinacridone gold. That will keep it in the green and just give it a little bit of warmth. But the indigo is what will make it nice and dark. And I'm also going to add a tiny bit of Sennelier red. So lots of colours in there. Don't believe people that you can only mix 3 colours. If you've got really good paints, more than 3 colours will still mix a lovely fresh tone. So number 4 brush. And what we're doing here is going to put some of the very fine dark creases that sit next to the veins. So we get a little bit of proudness next to some of the areas. When I was putting my colour on, I just tried a little bit out just to see if it would work. I always try and practice before I show you anything. So we're going to do a little bit more of that. This is sort of defining on one side of the vein. And we're going to use this lovely dark colour. So give it a little stir with your brush and give it a nice twist on the palette so that you've got a nice point. And if there's any blobs of water on the ferrule, just wipe it off on the dab pad. So brush on its tiptoe here because we want some nice fine lines. And anywhere where there's some nice darks, which there is around the points, I'm going to just tap those on as well in the same sort of motion that we did build the colour up. But so there's a few things that we can do. The little creases next to the veins and a little bit of darkness on the points. So let's start with the points. And it's just a little flick like that, very tiny little flick just underneath where the point is. So just look at the tip of the brush there, it's just sort of dancing around. They're not actually pointed, so I'm going to round the end. Just a little bit of a softer point to them. And just a little tap. And you can see that sort of punches off the page quite nicely. So you've got that around each of these. Little tiny stroke of the tip of the brush there, just to get them nice and sharp. And then we come back to the crease here and I want to get a nice fine deep line there, jumping over the main veins because you don't want to cut them off from the midrib, and a nice deep crease there. And then from that you can then, looking at the pattern that you've got to create underneath the vein, there's a nice little bit of darkness, and then you can just feather a few more nice little patches in there. A lot of people say to me, oh, how long does it take to do a painting? Well, it doesn't take very long when you're just doing the washes, But when you're coming back to the detail, that's what takes the time. And remember as well that our camera's zooming really closely in. So, I mean, you know, you're getting a really, really tight close-up of what my brush is doing. So close up, it can look a bit rough. Come back a little bit, and then you can see that everything starts to knit together and makes a nice pattern. But this sort of fine detail, well, I don't really put the stop clock on, I just do it, and then I may maybe do one half of a leaf and then maybe do something else that's less intense, and then come back and do the other half when I've had a rest from it. And one thing as a botanical artist is you never time yourself, because you'll never really you can't get paid hourly, you know, you do it for the love of it. So here we go. What we're going to do then is we're going to choose the areas that need defining with that dark. So I'm coming just behind those veins that I've lifted out. I'm just tapping slightly on the side of the brush there to get the nice little sort of wrinkles that are in that area, and then sharpening up next to the next vein. So each little patch gets its own little bit of attention. So I'll just do one more area just to show you. And I do go randomly over the leaf, because you don't want to work too closely to where you've just worked. So choose an area, do a little bit of work to it, and then move on to another area, and then come back to the adjacent area. And see, just by trimming alongside with that lovely deep rich green, you can create some lovely fine veins and definition. And remember, this is like the third application of paint onto this leaf, so lifting away from this is not a problem, because the paint is sitting on paint. So if you do make a mistake, slightly damp brush, just wipe over that area and tap it away with the kitchen towel, and then leave it to rest and come back and repeat. No, don't repeat your mistakes, but come back and repeat the process, and hopefully you'll get it right the second time. And if anything is a little bit harsh and you think, oh, I don't really like that, just have another brush. This is a number 6, but it could be any size brush, with a little bit of water on it, just slightly damp. And if there's anything that you don't like, you can just slightly tap away, just to soften any edges that you're not happy with. So that's what we're doing, and we're going to start at the top and work our way down. Well, that's quite a fiddly job, and as I say, you want to sort of just build it up gradually across the leaf. And the next thing that I would like to do is put on a little bit of dark red around the neck of the leaf. And I'm going to mix that up with some alizarin crimson, nice big wallop of that, and some French ultramarine. Now you want a very dry mix of this. When I say dry, I mean sticky, sort of gloopy, thick mix of this, because you want to just put it on in very small concentrated amounts. So I'll just put those two together. Pick that up with my number 4 brush because you want it nice and pointy, and very carefully draw. This is tiny weeny, your little bit of dark. Now it's all dark in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to concentrate on this leaf, and then when I put the other bits of red on, they will all sort of mix and then move down into the stem. There's a fine crease through the top of the stem that basically joins up with that red. So if I put the crease in red, it's quite a good little guide, and I can see how wide I need to go with the detail. So I'm going to come alongside, bearing in mind I've got to try and keep those veins, the main vein visible through the middle there. So we're just tapping on with the point of the brush. This is what we're doing, tap, tap, tap. And feathering it in. And of course you'll get it darker by leaving it to dry and then coming back and adding some more. So don't try and get it dark straight away. Classic mistake is just to keep working on it all the time, and all you end up with is a big mess. So just keep it real, as they say. Now, am I doing that right? Yes, I think it's a little bit wider and a little bit darker. So we'll leave that to settle. I'll soften it into the leaf very gently with a little bit of water, just where I've joined it on. And then leave that to dry, because I want that to dry. Just tease that down a little bit further. I want that to dry, and then I can go back over it again. I'm just softening that in. Yep, don't fiddle. So while we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to go onto the little stem, because I want the leaf to completely relax and rest and dry, because we've put a lot of detail in there. And what we're going to do is, hang on to your hats, because we're going to dry brush over some lemon, and that's going to be quite scary. So let's do the stem. Now the stem, foreshortened away from me, appears a sort of soft grey. I'll just have a little closer look. Yeah, it's a soft grey-green, so I'm going to use that as my background colour. So just the colour that we've been using to layer over the top is a nice enough green. So I'm just going to water that down and just put a little glaze of that quite watery green onto the stem. You can go straight over that crease, because we're going to let this bit dry, and then put the crease on again, maybe a little bit darker. So straight over, and then just going to taper that so it just curls in and under that other leaf. So that's nice and easy, just a very soft grey-green for the stalk at this stage. Now back to our leaf. The midrib at the moment is too thick. If you look at the midrib on the leaf, it's actually very, very, very fine. So while I've got that colour mixed that I was using for my final finishing colour, I'm going to hitch everything up a little bit, just so that that line gets thinner and thinner. So that's what I'm going to do now. So you brush on your tiptoe and just keep trimming away at that midrib, because it's so fine you're not seeing this great big white line through the middle of the leaf. But I like to do this really carefully, because sometimes you can forget to leave the midrib, so I always leave a little bit of extra room so that I can just taper it away at the end, rather than get to the end and then think, if only I'd left more space. It's a bit thicker than that. So I'm just darkening there, a little bit under there, and then come back and go just a little bit closer. And you can go along the other side as well, because the other side's a little bit darker as well. So again, the last hair on the brush and just keep tightening that, and just try not to cut off the veins that are coming alongside it. It's very easy to do that, chop them off. And it's quite fiddly to get them back, so try and keep those little junctions in there. So that's what we're doing all the way along that leaf, just making it finer and finer. And it's really quite dark on this bit and curling down, so I'm just going to tap on some more colour there. And this is quite light. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on a very light blue glaze over this part of the leaf. And I'm going to use cobalt blue. Just use my mixing brush here just to wake it up. And in fact, I'll just grab a bit of kitchen towel just to clean away a bit of space. Make a bit of space. Oh, that's some pink on there, sorry. Clean your brush. Get rid of that. You need clean water. Clean water there. Some French cobalt blue. It's a Monday morning here, so giving myself a bit of a break, getting the colours wrong. So you want it really watery and really pale, and then you want a nice soft brush to put it on with. I'm going to use my number 6. You want just a brush that's just going to place it on really lightly. Pick up that colour. It's really watery, so when you pick it up it almost disappears. And then I'm going to lay it over as a very soft glaze over all of that brush mark detail. Just very soft like that, right over the whole area. Pick it up and try not to go back over because you'll dislodge some of that colour. Just doing a lovely glaze of cobalt blue. A little bit more blue just on the corner where it's seeing the daylight. Trust me, looks good at the end. So while we've got that blue on there, I'm just going to put a little flick of it up here. Try not to lose my highlights. So we can always wiggle back a little bit of extra light if we need it right at the end. And then what we're going to do, I was going to dry brush, but actually everything's sitting quite nicely. So what I'm going to do, instead of dry brush, I'm going to do exactly the same. It'll probably be the famous last words, and everything will just get washed away, but we'll try it. Live life on the edge. Make a little space, and I'm going to put a glaze of the lemon instead of dry brushing it. Now ideally you want to wait until your painting's really dry, so what you could do at this stage is you could really blast it with a hairdryer and just get it super dry. That wasn't product placement. So you want it really, really dry so that you can just quickly put this glaze over and not dislodge anything. I'm hoping that it's dry enough. Let's give it a go. So my number 6, and then a very gentle sweep of lemon. This is to colour the veins. And over here, very, very gentle, hardly touching the leaf at all. And a little bit through the midrib. That's better. It's given it a little bit of life. So in the area where you've got all these little tiny veins, you can just flick over those as well, just to give them a bit of a colour. And then just tease a little bit out gently onto the lower veins. A little bit of yellow is better than none. Don't fiddle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry, and we'll go back to the number 4 brush and a fine bit of detail on the stem. Now if you look at the stem very closely, on the plant, it's got these tiny little speckles all the way down the stems, and I'm going to use that red that we mixed up, And I'm just going to mix a little bit with the green, so it's not so bright, it's a slightly duller red. And just going to draw that on in the shapes that I see. So it's more like tiny little dots, but they sort of connect. So this is the last hair on the brush, needs to be. And you're getting this lovely sort of almost zebra zigzag dotty pattern down the stem. And on the other side as well, a little bit on the other side, you can just about see. And when you're doing the other side, you can almost use a little bit of that red to sort of define the edge. Don't make a thick outline, just give yourself a nice crisp edge to that part of the stem. Then come back to your proper dark red, pick it up nice and fine, and go back over that crease, because remember we softened it a little bit when we put the green grey on, and you want that to be really dark. What you can do is you can add a tiny little bit of indigo to it to make it really dark, so that we can get it round this corner in a nice sort of deep tone, because there's no light getting in there, and it's quite nice just to get that really sharp detail. It's quite nice, that tone as well, it gives you that really nice dark shadowy red. So while I've got that on my brush, I'm going to tap that in here, and I'm also going to start moving it over for the next leaf. Just need to make it a little bit wetter. So just going to get this corner in here ready for the next leaf to be painted in. What I'll do is I'll finish this whole 3-sectioned leaf and show you the finished painting. All the techniques are there that you need to do that. And if you hang on to it, you can either add other leaves to the design. So you could do a whole page of Hellebore leaves. You could do a whole page of dark shiny leaves. It doesn't have to be all Hellebores. It's up to you. Or you can just do any old leaves together, making a little note of who's who, so for your reference. And that way when you come back to do a painting, you'll have that lovely page of leaves to refer back to. Very important that you keep little notes. I mean, you have my tutorials, but as and when you work on your own, it's always nice to have a reference of the colours. So apart from just downloading my materials list, you could actually have alongside your page here, like I did in my A to Z book, you could do little patches of your colours and make notes by the side of them, so you know what colours went together to make whichever colour. It's always a good practice, because you know, sometimes you don't always retain that information. It's a bit like me with my planting. I thought I'll write down what I've planted in my raised beds, the brand new raised beds that I've put in for my cutting garden, for my classes. And I planted a whole load of things, stuck a whole load of sticks in, and thought I'd better write down what I've planted, and I didn't. So now it's going to be exciting to see what I did actually plant there, as and when they come up. Now, just I've put that red on now, and just with a little bit of lemon, I'm just going to sweep over a bit of lemon through the centre, just to warm that centre up. So looking back at your leaf now, you can, when it's completely dry, you can zap it with a hairdryer just to make it really dry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up my middle green again. Don't use my best brush, I'm going to mix up some middle green, and that's the 2 yellows and the blue again. And I'm going to just do those really light dry brushing. Now this is something you don't have to do. I'm going to do it because it makes me feel like I'm finishing this leaf properly. And it's something that I do quite a lot of the time, just to sort of knit everything together, for want of a better description. So I'm going to put a little bit of dry brushing over the top, and then maybe after I've finished everything, I can come back and refine some of the veining. There's always loads and loads of refining to do, and my big catchphrase at the moment for people wanting to put work in is refine, refine, refine. So every time that you come back to your painting, think, can I make that better? Can I make it sharper? Can I make it more accurate? So that's what I'm sort of thinking. I'll do a little bit of dry brushing over the top. Now, you know, the dry brushing is where you wiggle the brush back like so. So you've separated the hairs. Just tap it on the dab pad so that it's not too wet, and then you just very gently sweep it onto the painting, and that just takes some of the definition away from the veining. I don't want it to be too loud. Sometimes you can outline it too much and it becomes too sort of a bit like an anatomical illustration of the nervous system or something. So I want to sort of mix those in a little bit. And I'm just very lightly, so the last whisper of the brush really, just a little bit of colour over the top, just to make the dark darker and make the light look lighter. And in here I think we can go a little bit deeper, take some of that definition away down here. It's a little bit too defined. Of course, if you take too much away, you can always just reveal it again as we did before, but I think it's quite nice just to sort of hide a little bit of the detail. It's there, but it doesn't want to be in your face, as the kids say. So I'm just tapping over here very, very lightly with the dry brushing, just to add a bit more colour and a little bit more distortion in there. Lots and lots of techniques to develop here. And over here, I'm going to tap my finger on it. So I'm going to drag the brush and tap, because I want a little bit of texture here, but I don't want it to be too obvious how I've achieved it. Obviously I'm telling you, but just want to hide a little bit of that obvious brush marks. So a tiny bit of refinement here on the serrations. When I was adding my dark green along here, I put little tiny dashes. In fact, I didn't probably didn't go dark enough. So let's just grab a little bit of that indigo and Sennelier yellow. Just those two together to get a really dark green. And I'm going to put that very dark green along this bottom edge, just to make these serrations really stand out. And then I've got my damp eradicator ready, so I've done about 4, and I'm just going to soften the top edge of that with the eradicator to sort of soften those into the leaf. A little bit of a scratchy noise when you do that, but you're just sort of allowing it to blend. A little bit of dark, nice little sweep like that. Clean damp brush and just catch the edge. There's quite a lot to learn on this leaf, so you know, you could revisit this, have a go, let it dry. If you've had enough, come back to it on another day. Don't feel like you have to sit there for hours getting it right the first time. There's a lot to take on board. Lots of little fiddly detail. And you might find it a bit overwhelming to start with. Now I'm doing a little cheat underneath here, just a nice little sharp dark line under there, just to really pull that leaf forward in front of the other one. And while I've got that dark colour on, I'm just going to put a nice little flick of that very dark, and again slim that vein down just a little bit more. Just, you know, if you half close your eyes, you can see how dark that is up there. And if anything's too heavy, just soften it in. Good, so you can always come back to the leaf and refine it a little bit more. Every time you do a bit more on something else, you think, oh, that worked. That would be quite good. On all the little serrations, it's quite good to look at the angle. Just going to make that a little bit more upright because they don't tip back. They come upright from the main part of the leaf and then sloping. So it's always a little bit of vertical and then a nice slope. So I'm just making those points really work properly. And also the other thing is to remember, and I did actually add, as I've gone along, I've made these a little bit more perfect each time because I tend to draw quite quickly and get the where they are, the placement of them, but not the actual defined shape of them. So it's quite nice just to sort of come back and really make those work for me. And don't forget that little bit of dark. Now we've got that really dark green just underneath each point. Really just helps make it stand out. There we go. So you can come back and put more detail, of those tiny little marks along the stem. Keep perfecting those because they will look really nice. Just lovely little pattern going down that stem in the red. So if they dry a bit lackluster, come back and add some more. You can also add a bit of dark green over the top of your dark red to make that groove really dark. And you can layer the green over the top of the red to make that dark in there a lot more gloomy. So there's lots of layering of darks if you want to get that really tucking in there. And I'm just sort of flicking over the top there just to show you that. That's the dark green over the dark red, just to get that really nice and gloomy. And I'll come back and perfect those as I'm doing the others. So it's basically you're looking to draw what you can see in front of you. So don't start making up. Keep looking at your photograph, looking at your plant and trying to mimic that. And anything that you are not happy with, use the eradicator sparingly because there's quite a lot of paint on the paper now. And so what I'm doing is I'm using the eradicator just very gently to smudge, if you like, blend and smudge the colours where I want it a bit smoother. And any lights that you want to take out as well. So if there's any bright highlights that you feel you've lost along the way, you can dab them out. So coming back to my highlight area there, I think that's what I'll do. My last thing that I'll do for this leaf today is I'm just going to wiggle out a little bit of white light somewhere. Clean damp eradicator, little wiggle and a dab, just to get some little bright patches. So that's lifting a little bit of that blue away where you didn't want it. And right on this corner here. Be quite ruthless there because this is the last thing that you're doing, so it's quite nice just to get right back to the white paper if you can, and that will give you a lovely bright look to the leaf. Just on those little tiny serrations there, get some bright light back. And just in here, a nice little patch. Just feather that in. If you're feathering in, don't dab, because otherwise you lift off all the feathery bits as well. Just a little bit of artistic license there. And just pushing that line up a little bit so I get a smoother line through there. And there we have it. There's our very intense hellebore leaf. So you can build up the other two exactly the same and you should have a really nice dramatic leaf on your page. And as I say, you can add other leaves to your leaf page as I showed you earlier in the project, or you can keep it and add it on to some flowers and make it into a hellebore study page. Or if you get the position right, you can put it together with the plant. And we'll give you a picture of the plant in my raised bed and hope that it survives for another year. Fingers crossed. Until next time, I'll see you then.